Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. So the Black Ops 3 beta is available on PC for a limited time, so I thought I'd give it a look. I think this is the first time PC's ever had a beta for Call of Duty. At least the modern Call of Duties at any rate. Maybe there was one back in the day, but certainly the last few releases have not had that. So it's an interesting opportunity to get a little hands-on with it before the release to see whether or not, as usual, the franchise is going in the right direction or the wrong direction. Now, I don't hate Call of Duty. I actually quite enjoy it. I mean, one would call it perhaps a guilty pleasure if you weren't a fully grown adult and didn't have to apologize for your entertainment choices. It's a decent amount of fun. Now, I hope that its campaigns would certainly improve. I mean, I remember playing the original Call of Duty campaign and being blown away by just how incredible it was, and it's just really gone downhill since then. But this is a look at the multiplayer, and it's showing quite a lot of features off. There's still some classes that are locked away, and there are some weapons that are locked away that are going to be available on launch, as well as some of the maps, of course. But it's a decent chunk of it. So what we're going to do is going to have a look, of course, at the options available. We'll have a look at create a class and talk a little bit about the way the score streaks and specialists work, and then show you some gameplay and talk about how I feel the gunplay and movement system is working. So let's start off with the options menu, as we generally do. It's got a separate thing down here for some reason. It's locked the gunsmith and paint shop options away, which is kind of a shame. I'd like to mess around with those, absolutely. That actually looks like quite a lot of fun, but never mind. And we'll head over to the options menu. It shows controls here, and you can rebind them, regardless of how it looks. It looks like you can't, but then you click on it and then away you go, instead of it just being an uninteractive little help key binding menu. So it starts off with mouse acceleration and mouse filtering on. You probably want to turn those off pretty much immediately. They definitely didn't feel great. Movement keys right here. So for the most part, you are not seeing a huge amount of shared keystrokes, which is always nice, although you do get it with stand and jump and all that sort of thing. Combat here, aim down sights, toggle aim down sights. So depends what you prefer. You know, maybe you just want toggle, maybe you just want hold down. You can have either. It's all good. So nothing too out of the ordinary here. Nothing really missing as far as I can tell. And then gamepad, but God knows why you'd ever want to use that. So, control rebinding seems to be reasonably solid, at least in the beta version. Of course, they may alter some of this. If we look at the graphics options, field of view slider always important for first-person shooters. Now, the standard recently for Call of Duty seems to be 90 as the top. This is, of course, an improvement on the 80 that the original Black Ops had, but if I recall correctly, Blops 2 did have 90. I would still like to see it go higher than that, but 90 is a baseline. 90 is relatively acceptable as far as I'm concerned. And you can even configure split screen. Yeah. Now, this game is supposed to have split screen that actually goes across multiple monitors on PC. If that's happened before, I've never played a game that's had it. It's a great feature, not exactly something that I would have expected, but a welcome one nonetheless. And considering more and more PC gamers are using two monitors these days, it does seem to me like you could take advantage of that. So it's great that this game has that option. As you can see here, it's vertical and horizontal split, but they did announce that they would be allowing for multi-monitor split screen, which is kind of great. Plus, you can pick what monitor you want here. Not enough games do this. There's even a few that default to the wrong monitor for me. So it's always nice to have this here. Borderless window available, plus windowed. Mode refresh rate goes all the way up to 144, which is always nice to see. And the frame rate is not capped at 90 or anything along those lines this time around, although you will struggle to get past 100. At least the 2560, 1440. All the resolution options you could pretty much expect here. You can see some clear 16:10 stuff here as well, which is always nice. Some modern games have been forgetting that, which is unacceptable. Graphics options, defaults to extra texture quality. I think they've learned from the previous games where people thought high was the highest and then it looked like it was 720p. I've fallen into that trap as well. Texture filtering low, medium, high, mesh quality, shadow quality, max frame rate unlimited as you can see here, plus binding to the common multiples of 30. Always nice to have. Can't really complain about that. You've got dynamic sun shadows and ambient occlusion that you can turn on or off, plus a variety of anti-aliasing options. Mine's off for the moment. I did notice it had a reasonably significant frame rate impact if I was running T2X or SMAA, and this game is not fully optimized as of yet, from what I can tell. As far as I know, there's no drivers for this yet. The latest NVIDIA drivers seem to be for the Ashes of the Singularity DX12 demo, so the game runs fine for me, but I am running on Titan X, and a lot of people on lesser systems are complaining about lower frame rates, and I'm not capping out at 144 or anything like that. I am seeing dips, so that's certainly something they need to have a look at and work on prior to launch. Scene resolution ratio, well, you could crank that up if you so desire. Good amount of options here. The only thing that's missing, at least that's obvious to me anyway, is an anisotropic filtering. Not really sure where that is. I know quite a few games have been binding it to, and sort of bundling it into other options, like it could be under texture filtering. But I don't know that, because texture filtering is not specific. So it's always nice to see that. It would be nice to have some better tooltips here as well for things like that. You know, does that include an anisotropic? Does it not? Would be nice. There we go. We'll apply those changes. That's always good. And out we go. Outside of that, audio. That's always nice. Just bear this in mind, by the way, voice volume doesn't seem to adjust the voice chat volume. It'll only adjust the barks and things like that in the game. So just bear that in mind. And you have some various audio presets here as well, which is quite nice. So this is very much like Bad Company 2. And I enjoyed the fact that I could mess around with that. So if you like to boost high, which might be useful, say, for hearing footsteps, if you want to have headphones mix and all that sort of thing, you can mess around with that. Good to have. And subtitles on or off here as well. Plus, you can run a system test to tell which of these bindings will be good for you. Voice chat. Turn this off immediately. God damn. Yeah, so if you want to turn off voice chat, this is exactly where you do it. It's got a separate menu for that. Unless you want to be sworn at and told that your mother is a whore by 12-year-olds, I would suggest turning that off immediately. It's not quite as bad on PC, but I've certainly encountered a few things. And some information here that I'm absolutely not going to show you, because that's got my IP address in it. Nope! Absolutely not. Thank you very much. But there's a little bit of network information there nonetheless. Be careful not to show that on stream. That's a damn good way of getting yourself DDoSed. All right, so that's that. Now, how have they messed around with create a class, and what's this whole specialist thing? So the biggest change to Black Ops 3 is that you now have this sort of subclass system, which goes by the name of specialist. Now, this affects your appearance, and it affects what special item you have. So there are a total of 9 specialists. As you can see, a lot of these are locked behind the rather arbitrary experience wall, which is a bit frustrating. But you know that I don't really like that form of progression anyway. So right now I've got 4 available, and I can pick either an offensive or defensive capability. So the gravity spikes upgrade here, which I unlock with an unlock token, means that I can slam down on the ground and pretty much destroy anyone in close range. Alternatively, I can get a speed boost, and these are kind of like kill streaks, but the little bar for them progressively increases. You do get them faster, I believe, if you get more kills, but you'll eventually get to use one of these. So even if you never get a kill streak, you'll be able to use one of these special items. And some of these weapons are pretty devastating, actually. I'll talk a little bit more about that once I get into the gameplay and talk a little bit about how these actually affect the flow of the match. But things like the Sparrow and the War Machine and the Tempest are devastating. I mean, we're talking one-shot kill level. Outside of that, if you don't want the weapon, you can get a special ability like Vision Pulse. There's Armor as well, and there's Glitch, which allows you to sort of travel back in time a little bit there. So this will give you a little bit more survivability. It doesn't last long. It's like a few seconds at most. But unless you get headshotted, it's very hard to die while you have that activated. So take your pick. I would say that the weapons seem to be significantly more useful than the vast majority of the defensive abilities, because they are one-shot kills. I mean, the Sparrow, you can get 6 kills. Hell, you can get more than that, because the arrows actually penetrate multiple people. So it's pretty crazy. I do like the individual look and the individual voice assets for each specialist. I think that gives you a little bit of personality, which wasn't really there previously. Good selection of different kinds of people there as well. The weird thing about them is that they're supposed to fall into particular roles. For instance, the unit barks often indicate that if an outrider goes down, it's like scout down or spotter down. If the battery goes down, that's assault down, and so on and so forth. But really, you have exactly the same weapons with the exception of your special, and exactly the same capabilities and stats with the exception of your special. So it's less of a class and more of a little perk, really. Now, diving to create a class, and we'll see what's going on here. So they've gone back to the pick 10, which I don't object to. What I do object to is they've gone back to weapon leveling again. I wish they'd stop doing this. They reintroduced it, I believe, in Black Ops 2, whereas Black Ops 1, you could unlock any attachment with an unlock token. So if I wanted my first unlock to be an underslung flamethrower for my AK-47, I could get it. And I loved that. That was great. That gave me so much more flexibility. And it made me willing to try out a bunch of different things. Now, there is a little bit of a downside to that, of course, because it required unlock tokens, whereas this time around, as long as you level up the weapon, you can pick whatever attachments you want. So I don't need to waste unlock tokens getting all of these upgrades. But I do have to level the gun up, and I always feel like at rank 1, the weapon is objectively worse. And it is. You know, if you don't have optics, for instance, maybe that's more of a preference thing, but you start off with iron sights. So if you don't have optics, that kind of sucks. But things like grip, that's an objective upgrade. Things like FMJ, that's an objective upgrade. Laser sight, objective upgrade, and so on and so forth. There's no real downsides to that outside of the fact that you can only pick a certain number of them. So whenever you want to try out a new weapon, let's say I don't want to use that. Maybe I want to try out the Weevil. So not only do I have to spend an unlock token to get that, but immediately this gun isn't as good as this gun. I despise that. I think it would be a lot better if they allowed you to try out the guns prior to buying them. That would be lovely. They do have the preset classes, which gives you a limited amount of access to later guns. For instance, if you want to try out the Haymaker 12, there is a default class that has that. But I still hate the idea of unlocking weapons like this and then having to unlock the parts for them. That, to me, is something that the series needs to get rid of. And the thing is, they've done it before. Black Ops got rid of it. And I'll object to this every bloody time they do it, by the way. I will. I am just this kind of person. The only other real problem I have with this is that Advanced Warfare, the previous title, seemed to have a number of fairly interesting guns that were a little bit non-traditional. For instance, you could get the wrist-mounted chain guns. They weren't very good, but you could get them nonetheless. And there were a few things that sort of messed with the overall meta of just having standard weapons. You know, this is based in the future, but, you know, we're not seeing any laser rifles or anything like that. It's possible that some of these guns later on have some special features, but everything that I've unlocked up to this point seems to be par for the course. Now, there's an SMG with faster fire rate. There's an SMG that's good for mid-range with more accuracy. This one is kind of balanced. The assault rifles, you've got fully auto ones with fastest fire rate, strongest damage, and so on and so forth. You can get semi-automatic, burst fire, and so on and so forth. Fully automatic shotgun, pump-action shotgun. Nothing inspiring, at least early on. Perhaps some of these classified weapons are a little bit better, but I'm not really impressed by this. And of course, gone is the drop system that was in the previous game, Advanced Warfare, which was of course developed by a different studio. It wasn't Treyarch. But while some people had problems with it, I thought it added a nice little bit of flair to the game. It gave a few more options, although I would say that some guns were objectively better than others. So this is not particularly inspiring, I've got to say. It's a little bit of a shame that the series seemed to have regressed in that regard. I do like the fact that optics don't count as an attachment. I believe some previous games did have optics as an attachment, which to me was kind of ridiculous. Secondary options here, I grab this launcher because I love shooting down the UAVs. You can grab a couple of different kinds of pistols here. I mean, you've got to get pretty far down the levels to get anything other than the MR6. And combat knife is now a special, so this thing is very dangerous. It'll pretty much kill you in one shot. You do have a melee attack, but you see a lot less of that now. There's none of those crazy knife lunges going on because people actually have to pick a combat knife specifically as a secondary, so you get far fewer melee kills in this game, which I'm much happier about. Lethals, you can take 2 of them if you get the Danger Close perk, I believe. Outside of that, I can choose this, or I can choose Semtex, and a lot of this is really far down the experience tree. You don't really get to try out things like Thermite and Combat Axe and C4 at the moment. Probably won't be able to do it before the end of the beta either, which is, again, a bit disappointing. Less options isn't good. A few interesting things. Shock Charge makes its return, although you have to level up ludicrously far to get it. There's a black hat there, I'm not really sure what that does. Smokescreen available in a trophy system. So a decent amount of tactical options there, and here are the perks. 6 for each as usual, and you can grab wildcards, which will allow you to grab 2 perks if you wish, although it takes up a lot of points to get it. Some fairly standard stuff. Sixth Sense, I tried this, I hated it. It seemed barely useful. It sort of flashes a direction indicator if it thinks an enemy is close by, but it's often way too late. It'll flash it while you're getting shot, which is no use whatsoever. So if you thought this was going to give you extra awareness, I found very little use for it. Afterburner recharge rate is always good. This allows you to get your specialist ability faster, which seems like it's going to be a default for a lot of people. And you can be undetectable by enemy air support, which is always nice, especially with the number of UAVs flying around the place. I picked Tracker up here because it shows enemy footprints in close proximity, so it gives you an indication of whether or not they're going to try and double back on you or anything like that. It's good for tracking people down. Hardwired, I mean, it's okay, but right now, things like EMP grenade are never being used, and smokescreen isn't being used either, so it's not hugely useful. Anti-up will allow you to get your score streaks faster, and fast hands, very popular. Swap and aim faster after sprinting. And then you've got gung-ho for hip fire, which is a very default thing. A lot of people use this. You can re-roll your care packages with that one. We've had that one before. There's nothing particularly new about that. This I found to be worthless. Maybe I just didn't have my audio set up properly, but I tried to listen for footsteps, even with this enabled, and I couldn't hear any of them. It's possible that I need to mess around with my audio setup. Blast suppressor is the one that I like. Makes my jetpack silent, and it also means that I don't show a minimap signature when I'm jumping around the place. So there you go. There's your creator class. Nothing too astonishing, I've got to admit. I do like the fact that it lets you create a class almost from the very get-go, and it gives you 5 slots to do it from the very get-go, which is good. That gives you a little bit of room for experimentation. And bear in mind that going in with multiple classes is always a good thing, because it doesn't let you customize your class while you're in the game. So you can't do anything like that. So I'd fill these slots out pretty quickly if I were you. Just bear in mind that the default customs are lacking in options, so you'll want to mess around with those. And that is pretty much it. So, specialist system is okay. I'll talk a little bit more about the balance implications and the way that the game flows in the gameplay, but I'm not hugely impressed by the customization. But then we don't get to play around with the gunsmith or the paint shop. So I think a lot of the customization is going to be coming from that. So I think it's perhaps unreasonable to take the game to task too early for stuff like that. I'm just a little annoyed that I think this whole creator class thing is very regressive compared to what they've done previously. I really think they could mess around with this a little bit more, and it would be nice to see them completely change this around and reboot it, but they haven't really chosen to do that, and I don't think Specialists adds a huge amount of customization in terms of gameplay. Alright, speaking of gameplay, let's jump into that. I'm going to commentate over some gameplay that I recorded earlier, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I think so far. Alright, welcome to the gameplay. We're going to be looking at Domination for the most part. Pretty much my favorite mode. There's nothing really on offer in the beta that is too different from what we've seen previously, so Domination seems like a pretty decent bet. Okay, well, looks like Call of Duty, doesn't it? I don't think anyone was expecting otherwise, really. It's the franchise that doesn't change all that much, but strangely enough, with Advanced Warfare, we saw a pretty big shift away from the norm. We saw a much faster game, a much more vertical game, a game that involved a lot of dodging and actually required a good amount of speed, a good amount of actions per minute to really keep up with. Now, the first and most obvious change that Black Ops 3 brings in comparison to Advanced Warfare is that while it does have a jetpack, the exosuit abilities are pretty much gone. They simply do not exist. They've rolled some of that stuff, of course, into the way that the specialists worked, but I'd like to highlight particularly what they've done to the movement system. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really like what they've done to the movement system. So, some people are comparing Advanced Warfare last year to Titanfall, but I would say that Black Ops 3 is much more comparable in terms of the way that they handle wall running and things like that. It definitely seems like they wanted to take the jetpack play from Titanfall, and they wanted to take the wall running, and they wanted to implement it into Call of Duty. But the way that they've implemented it is fairly basic. If you've played a lot of Titanfall, you know that there's a great deal of learning involved in figuring out the different maps and figuring out the optimal routes to do wall running, because you can actually gain a lot of speed and momentum by chaining together wall runs. Now, the way that the maps, at least in the beta, are designed means that chaining together wall runs is very difficult, because more often than not, the walls are not close enough together to do it, and you don't really gain a lot of speed and momentum by doing wall runs in the first place. More to the point, almost everything you do, whether it be a wall run or a dash or a jump, will always result upon the move ending in you slightly slowing down. You can't really maintain your momentum. It slows you down briefly before you get back up to full speed. That does not feel good, I'm going to be honest. That's very subjective, but the last thing that I would want from chaining together a bunch of moves would be that I then sort of stutter at the end, like, whoop, almost tripped over, silly me, oopsie daisy. That's not exactly what I was expecting at all, and it's actually really put me off using those movement abilities. So, unlike Advanced Warfare, you can't really do those frequent multiple direction dashes and adjust your trajectory over and over again. Now, you can do slides forward and to the side. That's entirely possible, although, as I said before, as you get up from that, it slows you down quite a bit. So more often than not, you end up just getting shot, particularly bearing in mind that those slides are going to be in a particular direction. You can't really change direction as you're sliding. So I often find, unless you're sliding into cover, it really makes you quite vulnerable because your movement is very predictable. Now, in Advanced Warfare, your movement was not as predictable because you could adjust it, you could do multiple dashes, you could change your direction on the fly, which meant that you could maneuver around and dodge incoming bullets and make yourself just a bit harder to hit. This really isn't the case this time around. You have a jetpack bar, so you can jump and you can adjust the height based on the amount of fuel that you have. And you can also wall run, which doesn't actually require fuel at all. So that's easy enough. You just kind of lock onto the wall as you press towards it and you run along it at a slight angle. Although more often than not, you can end up messing it up if you're not careful, because it's possible to actually run upwards and then over the wall and then fall to your death, which is quite frequent, I find, on some of the maps. A lot of the wall running that happens in the maps in the beta is above sheer drops, so it's a bit of a risk-reward. You can bypass a certain hot zone of the level in order to come out behind an enemy. And those areas are really obvious. Like, the game doesn't seem to have a great deal of potential for wall running creativity. It's more a case of, this is the place where you wall run, and if you wall run here, you will probably get behind the enemy, and you'll be able to pick up a couple of kills that way. That's mostly the way that it works on the beta maps. Occasionally, you can do a little wall run, which will allow you to gain a little bit of height, and it'll make you slightly less predictable when you're in a firefight, but for the most part, the wall running is fairly basic. I do like the fact that you can change direction. That's pretty cool. So you can actually jump off the wall and then stick on the wall again, perhaps at a different height, and run along it that way. So there's a little bit of learning there, but it really comes down to map design, and I haven't seen a great deal of inspired map design so far on the beta maps. There's that lack of verticality that I noticed, the sort of thing that was around in Advanced Warfare, where you really had to watch the roofs and things like that. More often than not, you just can't do it. In many cases, there are invisible walls. There's a map that has a little rock formation that it looks like you could just jump on top of, but you can't. There's actually an invisible force field there that prevents you from doing it. So I was a little bit disappointed by that. It seems like they've really gutted the movement system. That said, for some people, Advanced Warfare was a little bit too much of a departure. And a lot of people said, oh, well, this is not the Call of Duty that I know and love. That you have to do way too many actions per minute. I imagine it was quite a pain in the arse on the controller, but I only played it with keyboard and mouse. So I can see some people coming back to it because they have decided to tone that system down a little bit. But for me, that was very disappointing, because Advanced Warfare, for me, was a great departure from things that I didn't really like when it came to Call of Duty. And taking that movement system away has results. It has consequences. Remember when I was talking about Advanced Warfare, I spoke about time to kill, and the fact that Call of Duty is notorious for having a very low time to kill. You can kill someone very, very quickly with a rapid-fire weapon that generally doesn't have a lot of kick. A lot of guns in previous COD games have been described as bullet hoses, and that's maybe less of the case this time around. You can get a decent amount of accuracy, but I have noticed that a lot of the guns are not really a case of just aim down sights and hold down the trigger. It seems like there's a little bit more bullet spread. But what I did notice is, as a result of removing those movement and dodging elements from the game, the time to kill has effectively been reduced again. And that, to me, is a big pain in the ass, because a lot of the times that you die in Call of Duty, it's either to a kill streak, or it's because you were shot by someone that you couldn't see. And with 90 field of view, it's very easy to get shot by someone that you couldn't see. And it's often a case of whoever gets the first shot in wins. When you get hit, there's, of course, a bit of kick It's as a result of taking a bullet and your aim will get thrown off and things like that. So if you engage the enemy before they engage you, unless you really mess up, the chances are you're going to kill them. And that's what a lot of Call of Duty became over the course of a number of years. Finding a way to get in from the side and kill someone before they get a chance to see you. And Advanced Warfare had a little bit less of that because you could so consistently dodge and you could be on the move all the time. Not in this game. Not really. Whenever anyone lands, they get a little bit slower. It's actually very easy to predict which direction they're going to fly in because they're going to be flying most likely in a predictable straight line, and the slides are sort of the same there as well. So I've noticed the time to kill seems to be pretty low, and this also leads me into the specialist weapons. Now, these seem like a good idea in theory. It's sort of a second layer of score streaks. If you don't get a score streak, you'll eventually get your weapon to play around with, and it gives you that little highlight of the match where you get to run around being a murderous bastard. However, I've tried several of the weapons out, including the Sparrow and the War Machine, and I've also been shot repeatedly by the sort of lightning weapon. I am not a fan of those instant kill weapons from a distance. We're not talking about weapons where you need to headshot. We're not even necessarily talking about weapons that require a great deal of aim. Even the Sparrow, which looks like a precision weapon, explodes anyway, so even if you miss, you can probably kill them with the explosion behind them anyway. And I've hit a lot of shots with the Sparrow, surprisingly enough. It almost feels like there's a little bit of homing on it. I don't know whether or not that's the case, but I found it fairly easy to aim. More surprising than I expected. And if you hit somebody with it, that is an instant kill. Like, it doesn't matter what they're doing, it's an instant kill. The War Machine, if you hit them dead on in the face with it, that's an instant kill. It's more than likely going to kill them if the grenades hit them anyway, but face kill, absolutely instant kill. And the lightning weapon, the Tempest, exactly the same. You can get hit by that out of nowhere from a great distance. You don't even hear it coming, it kills you instantly, and that's it. And hell, it zaps people around you as well. These weapons are frequently appearing during the game. You can get them several times, especially if you have overclock, which means that every time you grab one of these things, yes, you can die with it and you lose it, but you can become a god of death briefly. You have limited ammunition and time with them, but you can kill a good number of people. So, I don't know if I really like them, honestly. I mean, the time to kill was low enough as it is, and now you put a bunch of instant kill weapons that don't require headshots? I don't know about that. That's a little bit unpleasant, and I've found myself frequently frustrated because someone's just tagged me in the foot with a Sparrow from halfway across the map, and I just died instantly, and I had no chance of really responding to that. War Machine's kind of the same thing because you can just have grenades coming up out of nowhere, and they instantly detonate. You don't really get a warning as they're coming in. And the Tempest, I've never seen anyone with a Tempest that hasn't murdered me before I've even had a chance to react. I don't necessarily agree with those, and also, I've got to point out that I think the abilities that you get, which are the alternative choice, are not necessarily as good. There's a Vision Pulse, that's kind of cool, but from what I can tell, the Vision Pulse actually shows you on the map as well, when you do it, and it's nice, but it's sort of just an enhanced UAV, really, versus getting a Sparrow, which is an instant kill weapon, and very, very powerful. I'm not necessarily sure if I'd take the Vision Pulse over the Sparrow. The same with the War Machine versus the Kinetic Armor. Kinetic Armor's nice, but you've got to be quick enough to activate it, and it only lasts for a few seconds. Plus, if you get headshot, it doesn't matter anyway. Plus, you can get killed by explosives with it. So, I'm not 100% convinced by that particular upgrade. And there's a couple of others like Bonus Speed. Bonus Speed versus the Instant Kill Knife Slam? I don't know about that. I think perhaps they need to do something with that. As far as I can tell, they both have the same charge rate, although it's hard to tell because it doesn't give you specific numbers. With the score streaks, of course, you know you need a specific number of score in order to unlock the score streak. With this, there's just kind of this circular progress bar, so it's hard to know whether or not the abilities can go off more often. That would be a nice balancing act, I think. Either that or they need to just buff the abilities, but really, some of those abilities are really strong. I mean, if you buffed the kinetic armor further than it is, it would eventually become an invincibility power-up, which I don't think is necessarily a great idea. So it's this weird situation where you can't make kinetic armor too powerful, but in its current state, taking that over the War Machine seems ridiculous, because the War Machine is so good. You know, it's a automatic grenade launcher that fires grenades which split into 3 other grenades. Why would you not? It's very, very dangerous. And again, the Sparrow's great too. I think there's probably some balancing acts to be accomplished here, and I don't think that the game is necessarily balanced at the moment, based on my very limited, admittedly, experience with it. So I'm not 100% keen on that. Outside of that, the game plays like a Call of Duty game. There's not really all that much different about it. I do like the fact that they've minimized the amount of kills via melee attacks. That's good. I like the fact that you have to take a knife as a secondary, so you've got to actively commit to that playstyle instead of having that stupid insta-kill lunge nonsense. So most of the close-range firefights are actually resolved with guns rather than knives, which is good. I will take that, absolutely. Pretty happy about that. But it does overall seem like a little bit of a step back. It's alright. I mean, it's a Call of Duty game, ultimately. It's got exactly what you would expect. It's got plenty of devastating kill streaks. Some of them are just absurd. I mean, the sort of Hellstorm, I think, missile it's called, can kill like 5 or 6 people very, very easily. And the only counter to that is to very quickly dash indoors to avoid it. There's a Rolling Thunder, which just devastates the entire map. There's a dropship which throws down these rolling, exploding balls. Oh my god, those are particularly brutal. There's something you can get which has like a Vulcan cannon which guns people down very easily. So the score streaks are powerful. There's no doubt about that. And I've seen people get really, really rich off those. Call of Duty's always had a rich get richer problem, where if you get a score streak and then you nail them with it, then you get many more points. I don't believe they stack. From what I can tell, I used to have a problem where a score streak would stack on another score streak, so I don't think you earn score by using score streaks from what I can tell. But it is very easy to really get rolling with a lot of dangerous score streaks and get a hell of a lot of kills that way. But that's Call of Duty in a nutshell, isn't it? I mean, what did you expect? They're not going to alter that. It's a very popular aspect of the series that people really like. If you get a few kills, people like being rewarded with the ability to rain down death. That's okay. Although I will say that, thankfully, UAVs are a little bit less powerful this time around. I think it's because of the ability to grab the rocket launcher, which can also be used against people. You've got a 2-shot lock-on rocket launcher, which kills UAVs very easily and kills a lot of aerial score streaks very easily, but can also be used to actually attack people. And we've had situations in the past where they've offered you like a Stinger, which can only fire at air. This thing, you can fire it blind and blow somebody up with it, or you can also fire it in the air. So UAVs obviously happen a lot, but you can shoot down a great deal of them, and I take that for a very good reason. I think the meta might end up going in that particular direction, simply because people know they can get a lot of free points from shooting down UAVs, and killing enemy UAVs and counter UAVs is great. It helps your entire team, so I guess the UAV situation isn't too bad. As far as I know, there isn't a score streak that tracks everybody on the map all the time, which has happened in previous games. Maybe there is one later on, and people just haven't unlocked it yet, but I certainly haven't seen one. I've never seen one come out of a care package. All I seem to get from care packages is UAVs or the floating XKCDs, so... Is it an XKCD? That's a webcomic, isn't it? The exploding little remote control car thingy, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm not hugely impressed by it. Performance-wise, as I said, it doesn't run incredibly well. I think they do need to polish that one up a little bit. I'm on a very powerful system, and I'm still getting frame drops, and plenty of people are complaining about frame rate issues. What I will say is I haven't noticed a lot of lag problems. They are running on dedicated servers this time around, so they claim. I haven't noticed any obvious warping around or any really bad latency problems, so hopefully they've cleared that up a little bit, and hopefully the dedicated servers will also help a little bit with the hacking situation that infested Advanced Warfare. So that's a good thing. But I'm not hugely excited for this release. I'm honestly looking forward a little bit more to the zombies, because I like the particular theme they've gone with it. They've gone sort of down a Cthulhu avenue, a sort of Lovecraftian thing with some interesting old-timey noir stuff. So I'm interested in playing that, and we'll see how the campaign turns out. Black Ops 2's campaign was okay, so hopefully Black Ops 3 will have a decent one as well. But the multiplayer, at least in the beta so far, seems to be so standard, and it's really a shame to me that they took steps backwards in terms of the movement system. It almost feels like the jetpacks shouldn't really be there, because they're not really that well implemented, and that momentum loss every time you use them is counterintuitive as far as I'm concerned. If you want some really great free-flowing movement, and certainly if you want to be compared to Titanfall, then they're nowhere close. So Titanfall had some great momentum-building functionality with the wall running, and the jetpack management took a great deal of skill, and I think the level design was built around that. And it seems like more of a gimmick. Based on what I'm seeing in the levels, there's just not that much verticality, and there's all of the wall running sections are basically signposted. It's like, here, this is where you wall run. There's not really a lot of room for creativity there. So that's a little bit of a shame. Yeah, I'm not thrilled by it. Not at the moment, anyway. I found Advanced Warfare much more exciting because it seemed like they really wanted to take the series in a different direction. Black Ops 3 really isn't that, and there's a few too many things in it that I disliked from the previous games and have made their unwelcome return. And the new stuff, I don't necessarily think it really helps the game. I don't think it really adds to the game to have all of those instant kill weapons floating around the place that are so easy to acquire. It ends up feeling frustrating and cheap. You open fire on that guy at range like, yeah, I'm gonna get a long shot kill. Oh, never mind. I just got tasered, or I just got blown up by an explosive arrow from out of nowhere. Ugh. As I said, you die so much in that game anyway. I think the last thing you want is to promote even quicker deaths, but that seems to be Black Ops 3 in a nutshell at the moment. Well, we'll see what they do. Maybe they balance it out for release. I'll obviously have a look at it post-release and see how the full version plays out. I'll want to have a look at the campaign. I'd like to have a look at zombies, because I don't really do that all that often. So it would be kind of cool to see what they've done with that. Maybe it's a little bit more interesting. Perhaps. We will see. But this is... it's COD, you know? And it's sad to say that, because I didn't say that with the last one. I said, hey, this is brand new COD. This really feels a little bit different. And this one, well, doesn't, frankly. Black Ops 3 beta, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have a look at it post-release, and of course, you can try it out right now. It's either pre-order, or if you have Advanced Warfare or Black Ops 2, I think, or maybe Ghosts, you can get access to the beta right now on PC to give it a try for yourself. My name has been Total Biscuit. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.